So picture this. You finally gathered the courage to set a boundary, right? You take a deep breath, you say no, and bam, the other person goes completely on the offensive. Suddenly, you're defending yourself, getting super flustered, and feeling that all too familiar spike of anxiety. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really effective, systematic method straight from our source material on resilient assertiveness. It's literally designed for these exact high-pressure moments so you can hold your ground without crumbling. If you've ever felt like setting a boundary is just an open invitation for a massive argument, you're absolutely going to want to stick around for this. We're going to dive into a communication tool that completely flips the script on difficult conversations.
How do you actually cope with criticism when you're just trying to say no? I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? It's a hugely stressful problem. Just imagine you're turning something down, like maybe you say no to an extra project at work because your plate is just completely full. Instead of a simple, okay, no problem, suddenly they hit you with, you're really not being a team player right now. Ouch. That pushback is intense. Our source text actually points to this specific friction point, that exact moment your no gets met with criticism, as the main battleground for assertiveness. It's exactly where most of us just kind of fold. We start over-explaining, arguing, or we just cave in to make that awful discomfort go away. But there's actually a very specific solution for navigating this exact trap.
And that solution? It's called fogging. Our source defines fogging as a systematic skill that you learn specifically to cope with criticism. I really want to highlight that word, systematic. This isn't about just winging it and hoping they back down. No, it's a structured, learned behavior. Think about the visual metaphor for a second, because it's honestly brilliant. If you throw a heavy rock into a thick bank of fog, what happens? Well, the fog doesn't push back, right? It doesn't argue with the rock. But the rock also doesn't leave a dent in the fog. The fog just absorbs the impact completely without changing its form. That is exactly what this technique teaches you to do with criticism. It's a tool you pull out to build resilient assertiveness when you're under fire, making sure the attack just passes right through you.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this systematic skill actually plays out in a real conversation. It breaks down into 3 different types of agreement. First up, you learn to agree with the critical truth. This is absolutely crucial. If someone criticizes you using a fact that is, well, actually true, you just agree with it. For example, say someone tells you you're being really stubborn about this timeline. Now, if you know you're refusing to budge, well, actually that is factually true. So instead of getting all defensive, you just say, you're right, I am being stubborn about this. Boom. It instantly diffuses the fight. But here's the absolute secret sauce of fogging. You agree with the critical truth, and you still do what you want. You don't let their factual critique derail your boundary. You absorb it, own it, and hold your position.
But what if they switch things up? When they try to predict your ultimate downfall. Criticism really often comes dressed up as doomsaying. They might look at you and say, look, if you do it that way, the client is absolutely going to hate it. Or if you decline this, it's never going to work out for your career. Our source instructs that the next application here is to agree with the odds that you will fail. You just acknowledge their point about the risks. You might say, you know what, you might be right. The client might actually hate this. You're just agreeing that the odds exist. But once again, we come right back to the core power of this technique. You agree with those odds and you still do what you want. The mere potential for failure doesn't override your autonomy to make your own choice.
Now, sometimes the critique you face is just totally logical. Like, it makes perfect sense on paper. For instance, someone might point out, hey, if you don't attend this networking event, you're missing out on key industry contacts that could really help your business grow. I mean, that's a completely logical statement, right? The fogging technique teaches you to handle this by agreeing in principle with logical criticism. You validate the logic. You say, that makes complete sense. Attending would definitely help me meet key contacts. See, you aren't fighting the logic because, well, the logic is sound. However, and this is key, validating someone's logic does not mean surrendering your autonomy. You agree in principle, but you still do what you want. You're basically saying, yes, your logic is flawless, and my answer is still no. It completely neutralizes the argument without you having to sacrifice your boundary at all.
And that brings us to the core philosophy of this whole fogging matrix. Think about it. When someone criticizes your boundary, what do they expect? They expect resistance. They want you to argue back, because arguing gives them leverage. But look at how completely disarming this approach is. Whether they hit you with the critical truth, the odds you'll fail, or a perfectly logical criticism in principle, the ultimate outcome is exactly the same. You absorb it, you agree with their premise, and you still do what you want. Regardless of their angle of attack, you just don't give them that friction they're looking for. You create that conceptual fog. By agreeing, you step entirely out of the tug-of-war. The criticism just passes right through the air, and your boundary remains completely intact, leaving them with absolutely nothing to push against. Now, the source text reveals something I found incredibly fascinating. This skill isn't just for deflecting hostile attacks. At the same time participants learn the core fogging technique for coping with criticism, they also discover these really practical, everyday applications. For instance, they learn how to assert negative points themselves, basically owning their flaws before anyone else even has the chance to point them out. And, maybe the most surprising part, the text explicitly notes its use for coping with compliments. Seriously, think about it. Receiving a compliment can sometimes make us just as squirmy and uncomfortable as criticism. We usually deflect it or play it down, right? But if someone overpraises you, you don't have to act falsely modest. You can just fog it. If someone says, "You're an absolute genius for fixing that spreadsheet," you can simply say, "You're right, I did crush that project." It's this beautiful, systematic framework that applies to both sides of the spectrum.
So we've explored how fogging allows you to gracefully acknowledge criticism, whether it's the raw truth, the odds of failure, or a deeply logical point, all while fully maintaining your autonomy. It is literally a masterclass in holding your ground without ever needing to raise your voice. So here's my challenge to you. Think of a specific person in your life, maybe a coworker, a friend, or a family member, that you consistently struggle to say no to. How are you going to use this systematic skill the next time you face their criticism? Are you going to keep getting defensive and frustrated? Or the next time you face that wall of pushback, will you argue or will you become the fog? Take this incredibly practical tool of resilient assertiveness right into your own life and start holding those boundaries calmly, confidently, and completely stress-free.